Fluorescent lights in the large office cast a sterile glow over the cubicles, as Deena and Joey found themselves working late. The hum of computers and the rustling of papers were the only sounds that broke the silence. A new employee named Peggy was hunched over her desk in her usual spot, lost in the world of paperwork and numbers. Joey had promptly bestowed upon her the nickname Square Peg, his not-so-subtle way of referring to her as a boring nerd. As the days went by, Peggy's reserved demeanor only reinforced Joey's assumption. He had an uncanny ability to find the most annoying way to tease someone, and he seemed to take particular delight in poking fun at Peggy. Joey wasn't a bad guy, but the roasts weren't as funny, or as cute, as he clearly thought they were. Despite the snide remarks, Peggy never responded, her focus unwavering as she continued to work in solitude. Deena, who occupied the cubicle across from Peggy, couldn't help but observe the enigma that was Peggy. A good judge of character, Deena had always prided herself on her perceptiveness. She noticed Peggy's conservative fashion choices, the perpetually neat bun in her hair, and her penchant for wearing all-black outfits. Peggy's lack of jewelry struck her as odd, too. Most of all, what stood out was her restrained and nearly emotionless personality. She certainly didn't seem like a happy person. Some people just don't get an easy win in life, Deena thought to herself. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the office, Deena glanced at her watch and wondered why Russ, the security guard, hadn't made his usual rounds. She casually asked Joey if he'd seen Russ recently, but he shrugged it off, saying he hadn't crossed paths with him for a couple of hours. Deena didn't give it much thought and continued with her work. Later, Joey stood in his cubicle, his face twisted in annoyance. A putrid smell lingered in the air, prompting him to announce his trip to the break room for a soda. He inquired if anyone wanted anything, and Deena declined. Peggy remained silent, a stoic figure amidst the office hum. Joey, seeing an opportunity to poke fun at Peggy again, remarked that maybe she could use a drink to lighten up. Peggy's stern facade was unwavering. She was a rock as usual. Suppressing her own chuckle, Deena glanced again in Peggy's direction just as Peggy's gaze shifted to her. She had definitely seen Deena stifling a laugh. Deena hoped this wouldn't lead to an issue between them. The last thing any of them needed was workplace drama. Joey's poor attempt at humor was enough to deal with. Peggy's blank stare returned again to her work. Minutes after Joey's departure, Deena's peripheral vision caught a strange movement. Peggy had risen from her desk, her movements almost mechanical, and was now making her way down the hall. Deena frowned, perplexed by Peggy's sudden activity. Peggy didn't typically move from her desk even during breaks. Another minute later, Peggy returned and took her seat, seemingly unaffected. Deena's curiosity grew, but she didn't dwell on it for long. Time dragged on, the dim office growing eerily quiet. Glancing around, Deena realized Joey had been gone for 20 minutes. A gnawing unease settled in her stomach. Had he become ill? Did he leave without saying anything? Deena broke the silence, directing her question to Peggy. "Hey, Peggy, did you see Joey out there?" Peggy didn't respond. Deena hesitated, then stood, walking past Peggy's cubicle, making a point not to look over at her. Arriving in the hallway, a chilling sight halted her steps. A thick trail of blood led from behind the closed door of the utility closet, staining the tiled floor. Deena's heart raced, and a sense of dread consumed her. Feet planted firmly in place, her eyes followed the dark red trail down the hall and into the break room. Hoping that it was some morbid prank, a new low for Joey, and hardly safe or ethical practice in a work environment, Deena resisted the urge to outwardly express her concern. Swallowing hard, she pushed forward and opened the closet door. A gut-wrenching sight awaited her. Russ and Joey lay in pieces, their bodies torn apart in a gruesome tableau. The putrid smell, now overpowering, emanated from the closet. Deena's mind recoiled in horror. She fought back a scream, her trembling hand reaching for her phone to call the police. Just as her fingers brushed the device, she felt a presence behind her. Slowly, she turned, her eyes locking with Peggy's. Peggy's appearance had undergone a grotesque, impossible transformation. Her fingers stretched into elongated claws, dripping with blood. Her expressionless face now bore a malevolent sneer, her teeth sharp and menacing. Her once tame hair had fallen around her shoulders, writhing as if with a life of its own. Pale bluish-white eyes stared into Deena's, and when Peggy spoke, a chorus of voices, each ghostly and unnatural, resonated in eerie harmony. "Joey didn't find me at all boring there at the end," the voices intoned, carrying a haunting echo. Peggy took a deliberate step toward Deena, who was paralyzed by terror. "You thought Joey was so funny," the voices continued, as Peggy moved closer. "Tell me, Deena, do you think he's funny now?" Deena's scream finally escaped her lips, shattering the silence that had enveloped the office, just as Square Peg closed the distance between them and claimed her easy win.